The Memphis Grizzlies are 9-1 in their last 10 games. All of those are without their all-star in Ja Morant. So let's talk about why they have been so dominant and why they are now the 4 seed and a legit threat in the Western Conference. But before we get into those arguments, let me preface it by saying that prior to the Ja Morant injury, I was critical of the Memphis Grizzlies so far on the year, specifically due to their defense and their defensive intensity. They were one of the worst defenses in the NBA at that point in time when I made that video a couple of weeks ago on what is typically a team that has been known for having a defensive identity, for being hardworking, for having a lot of depth, and that it seemed to have fallen away this year in terms of their defensive intensity and their compete level. Well, that is now the biggest reason for their success since Ja Morant has been out of the lineup. And we'll get into how the offense has also been more than fine with him out as well, which of course is the biggest loss. But the Memphis Grizzlies have returned to their defensive identity, and that is what makes them best. The Memphis Grizzlies over the last 10 games are not just playing well, but they have been dominating. They've been far and away the best defensive team in the league by defensive rating, along with the best net rating, and it's not even close. They are multiple points below a 100 defensive rating. No one else is below 100. It is outrageous how good their defense is on defensive rating right now. And so, what led them to be one of the worst defensive rating teams in the league to one of the best? Well, part of it is that Dillon Brooks was out for the majority of the start of the year. He's now played about 15 games, and him being back in the lineup certainly helped. He is a big part of what their defense is and does. It's not just his production and his ability on the defensive end that has to be incorporated, but also just his intensity that he brings that then rubs off on others. Now, you could argue still even then, and it's not really even an argument, I think, in my opinion, that he is the best perimeter defender on this team. He is their lockdown guy against opposing teams' guys. He's put some brilliant defense in on Steph in some games late on last year in the play-in and getting into those play-in games, and is significantly better than those other guys in and around his position that are going to be defending when you're looking at guys like Desmond Bane or Kyle Anderson. However, the biggest reason has nothing to do with Dillon Brooks being back in the lineup. The biggest thing is just that Memphis are competing more on the defensive end. They have more energy on the defensive end. They're more active, and they are just playing much better as a unit on that defensive end of the floor. Memphis just didn't look like they cared enough early on in the year. Simply put, they just didn't. But they've always been a team that had that defensive identity. Of course, going back to the Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph, Mike Conley days, and even still since then, they've always been a hardworking defensive team with a good enough offense to get themselves into in and around that play-in game discussion. And the roster changed this summer, but not significantly enough in a way that you would think they would now be some terrible defensive team. And well, they have corrected that, and they're now looking pretty darn good on defense. But now more specifically to them missing Ja Morant. Sure, the Memphis Grizzlies defense has been great, but how have they been making up for that offense, and how has the offense fared with Ja Morant out of the lineup? Well, they haven't actually taken that much of a step back offensively. They are 5th in offensive rating on the year. Over the last 10 games, they're 6th. They're still one of the top teams in the league on the offensive end without Ja Morant, which just speaks the depth on this team, the high-level scoring they have around him, and the 3 players in particular that are the high-level scorers around him we're going to get to in a minute. But how good this Memphis Grizzlies team can be when Ja Morant is back in the lineup, kind of scary. So that being said, that 3 supporting pieces around Ja Morant that are pretty darn good scorers: Jaren Jackson Jr., Dillon Brooks, and now, in his breakout season, Desmond Bane. And so let's start there. Desmond Bane's been absolutely brilliant this year. Big step forward, averaging over 16 points per game. Extremely efficient from 3. Has had a lot of very good first quarters leading for them in the first a lot of the time. Has hit some very big 3s late in game. Continued to do that last night. Hit 4 or 5 threes, if I'm not mistaken. He's been extremely good for them to start games in the clutch, you name it. When they need a bucket, he gets it. He is their best perimeter scorer and shot creator at the moment. He was inserted into the starting lineup this year over Kyle Anderson, and he has been absolutely brilliant. Throughout this last 10-game stretch, he is averaging 18 points per game, over 5 rebounds, nearly 3 assists, over a steal, and shooting absurd efficiency, shooting 47% from deep on over 6.5 attempts per game and shooting 46.5% from the field on a bit over 14 attempts. Absurdly good efficiency for a second-year player. Desmond Bane's upside is extremely high as an offensive player, and he has been crucial to why the Grizzlies have been so good without Ja Morant. Another key piece, the guy that was just paid this summer to be the co-star to Ja Morant in Jaren Jackson Jr. He has been solid since Ja Morant has been out. He has been their leading scorer at 20 points per game since Ja Morant has been out of the lineup in these last 10 games. He's been brilliant. He had a bit of a slow start, no doubt about it. He still isn't anywhere near as aggressive or as productive on the boards as you would like for someone at his size, but he's still a great defender, a solid rim protector, averaging nearly 2 blocks per game, can defend out on the wing, has very good mobility, and is starting to expand his offensive game. He is shooting 48.5% from the field on a bit over 14.5 attempts per game on this 10-game stretch. Absolutely brilliant for someone who's now had an increased role with Ja out and continues to play well from a production standpoint, but also from an efficiency standpoint, still shooting nearly 36% from deep as well. And the third piece is the Canadian Dillon Brooks, of course, who's often known more for his defense, but can get you some buckets as well. Not always the most efficient scorer, which is a bit of the downside on him and often can be in foul trouble, but he's been getting buckets for them. Inefficiently at times, no doubt about it, especially from 3 so far this year, as he hasn't really gotten his 3-point game going as much as you would like, but he can get some buckets at the rim. He has good strength to finish at the rim. He can get himself a shot. He isn't the most efficient shot maker while creating his own shot, but he can create his own shot and hit it at times. And that's what he's been continuing to do for this Memphis group while Ja Morant's been out. Over the last 10 games, he's averaging about 18 points per game, at nearly 4 rebounds, a bit over 3 assists, nearly a steal and a half, while shooting 42% from the field and a bit over 30% from deep. Never going to be the most efficient scorer, at least from what we've seen so far throughout his career, but can get you some buckets and is a solid, crucial two-way player to the success of the Memphis Grizzlies. This was someone that was in some trade talks throughout the summer. Yeah. His home is Memphis as far as I'm concerned. He fits in great with his team and is very crucial to what they have going forward. But to bring it back to the key points, the key reasons why the Memphis Grizzlies have been so successful, even without Ja Morant, is not their guys stepping up on offense. It's the fact that they have so many other good things going for them that will continue when Ja Morant is back, and it is so encouraging to how Memphis can be a top-tier team in the Western Conference moving forward. Those reasons are their depth, where you have 3 guys who can score very well outside of Ja, as just mentioned, Dillon Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bane. You have the guard depth to fill in for someone like Ja Morant. When you have Melton and Tyus Jones, and their team in general is just extremely deep. They have 12 to 13 guys they can go to on the rotation, and they're solid. Like, they're solid NBA rotational players. You're not throwing out guys that you're really scared about having out there. They have very good depth, and you're looking at guys like Tilly and Tillman being like 10th, 11th, 12th guys. Pretty solid. Brandon Clark, shout out to him as well. He's had a very good year and a very good efficiency year as well. But then, of course, the next biggest reason is just their defense being so good. Getting back to that defensive intensity, that defensive identity, and committing to being a top-tier defensive team in the NBA. If the Grizzlies continue to be one of the best defensive units in the NBA, once Ja is back, they're going to be a tough team for any team to deal with in the Western Conference, especially come playoff time. I'm not saying this team's going to be some title contender this year, but this team's young, they have upside, and they're already looking a lot better than people expected, me included, for this season. That is my thoughts on the Memphis Grizzlies recently, and specifically how well they have played without Ja Morant on this 9-1 stretch. Let me know down in the comment section below what you guys think about the Grizzlies so far. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.